Hello and welcome. Namo Buddhaya. Let me check what the time is. 10:33. So moving straight on with your comments. If I can talk about some of those today. So, how can we help ourselves practicing Dharma concerning chronic illness and, brackets, also medicate if advised, close brackets, and still keep the precepts? How do we really work with the hindrances and kilesas so we keep to the path? Okay. How can we help ourselves practicing Dharma concerning chronic illness? Firstly, by reflecting on the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, which are that we are subject to aging, sickness, and death. Also, we are the heirs to our karma, owners of our karma, beneficiaries of our karma. All that we love and hold dear, we will be parted from. Aging, sickness, and death we are born into. We can help ourselves understand through the eyes and with the heart of Dharma, that this is normal. We cannot expect to be born into this life, into this world, into this existence, without suffering. This is, after all, the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. There is suffering, a cause of suffering, an end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. The cause of suffering is the desire, not only desire that fuels to additional suffering, but the desire not to have the suffering we have, seeing it as something that is not normal. But when we recognize that during the aging process we will have pain, we will have sickness, discomfort, there will come a time we can't do the things we used to do, but additional suffering is created by lamenting on this fact, rather than seeing it as just that, a fact of life. One of the fundamental and the characteristics of existence is that all things conditioned are impermanent, anicca, and subject to unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, and out of our control, not self, anatta. So that's how we help ourselves in the Dharma, remembering that in relation to chronic illness. And also medicated if advised, yes, on prescription medication and still keeping the precepts. This has no contravention of the 5th precept, refrain from intoxicants. In this precept, it is referring to the taking of intoxicants leading to mindlessness as opposed to mindfulness. Mindlessness in the sense that one might drink alcohol or smoke marijuana and therefore be not only legally unable to safely drive a vehicle, for example, one would be breaking the law, but also endangering either your own well-being and health and safety and that of others. This is mindlessness. It's led to mindlessness. It may be that you went with the full intention of not driving, took some drink, and then because of your inhibitions being relaxed, then did drive. This is an example of mindlessness as opposed to mindfulness. So this is why it's discouraged. Now also, the Buddha regards as an intoxicant pain, because pain, after all, is very much an intoxicant. You are, by the very example here, saying, how can we meditate when we're suffering from chronic pain? Of course, with difficulty. How could we drive a car safely when we're in chronic pain with difficulty? Because it is an intoxicant. It can take over your focus and draw away your concentration from what you should be holding your attention upon. So in that respect, it is an intoxicant. Now, to take some medication, pain, analgesics, paracetamol, ibuprofen, aspirin, whatever it may be, even much stronger medication, as is often prescribed by doctors, if it's prescribed, it is done so very carefully, in accordance with your conditions, and under the expert supervision of that doctor, physician prescribing the drug, to counteract, to alleviate, to help you with regards to the pain, thus neutralizing one intoxicant with a drug to reduce that suffering of pain that, unless abused and being used for alternative purposes, is not classified as an intoxicant in the sense of breaking the fifth precept. If one isn't suffering pain and goes and picks oneself up some morphine, takes the morphine just for fun, this is clearly a breach of the fifth precept. But if you're in absolute agony at the roadside, having suffered a traumatic accident, and a paramedic administers some gas and air, laughing gas, or an injection or something of morphine in order to help you in that moment of pain and acute suffering, then this isn't willfully taking an intoxicant for fun. It is to balance the situation out in order that you can be helped. Because you need sometimes some pain relief in order for the doctors to be able to administer the right treatment, because you need to be able to relax a little. Even anesthetic, you see, could be considered an intoxicant, but you need this to have the operation to be repaired, to be fixed. So don't consider ever, if it's sensibly used and prescribed medication, it being an intoxicant. Now, this isn't the olden days where you're a cowboy who's been shot in the leg and you neck a bottle of whiskey to get out of the suffering. Of course, I'm not referring to that. We're talking about this modern day and age in the modern world, when ordinarily pain relief is given under supervision. So that's really what you're asking me there too. Now, as far as how do we really work with the hindrances and the kilesas so we keep to the path? In the same way as we work with the hindrances and the kilesas to keep to the path, as we do when we're fit, young and healthy, without any problems of sickness, pain, and this kind of suffering, this dukkha. Because there is always dukkha in the five hindrances. Sensual desire, ill will or aversion, laziness or just tiredness, lack of enthusiasm, restlessness and worry, or doubt. These are the five hindrances. There are only these. These get in the way of our meditation when we're sitting, and also, in fact, in the way they create obstacles to all manner of things in our everyday lives. And when they can be clearly seen and recognized in meditation, it helps us dealing with, for instance, aversion in our everyday lives. So we have a painful knee in meditation. We don't want this painful knee. But the not wanting of this painful knee is a double edge to this sword of pain, because we already have the pain of the knee, and then the real desire not to have the pain is just causing us additional suffering. But the equanimity that comes from acceptance, knowing that it is ordinary, it is a fact of life to have some pain in this knee because you've been sitting a long time, or you're getting old, or it's just worn out with time, is a matter of aging, sickness and death, then we are less likely to build up this hindrance of aversion. But I will say, whilst we have the opportunity as younger people who might be watching this to practice meditation, practice keeping sila, the precepts, and develop this wisdom, this understanding, and so that we can build equanimity towards things like suffering and pain, that will inevitably come along later in our lives. If we can, and we do have that opportunity to practice whilst we're more young, fit and healthy, then do so. This is the urgency in the practice. This is why we should not let time pass by as it relentlessly does, thinking, oh, I can put meditation off to another day. Because before long, you will be suffering, and it will be much harder to develop the skills we have in meditation of absorption, samadhi, or even further, moving into deep states of meditation like the jhanas, if you are already suffering. Now, that's not to say if you start late in life with some effort, with much discipline, you cannot still to attain to very good levels of developing meditation in terms of samadhi and even the jhanas. It's not excluding it, but the younger you start, the earlier you start, the fitter you are when you begin, the better prepared you are to deal with the physical difficulties that will arrive later. You've got over the original hurdles of the 5 hindrances whilst you're fit and able to do so, which then enables you and empowers you to be less affected, more equanimous with the suffering that will arise inevitably later on in life. So we must always remember this, that if you're okay now, this is the time to practice. Don't put it off because now I'm old, I'm ill, now I must practice. I'm not saying it's too late, but it's much more difficult to start then. Take it from one who started this practice relatively late in life. I was fit and healthy, fortunately, after some time of getting fit and healthy, from not being that fit and healthy, but just by keeping the precepts and advancing that into taking 8 precepts where I was only eating 1 meal a day, sleeping on the floor, avoiding entertainment and beautification and all of these things, actually built my strength, fitness and health back to what it should be for the age that I was at the time when I began the practice in my late 30s, early 40s. So this was very conducive to the practice later on. Now I'm mid-50s, approaching 57, and have had some injuries and problems recently. I am better placed and able to deal with those. I haven't had to go back to England and have the luxury of what I would be coming from England benefiting from. If I was there in my home country, I could perhaps go and stay in my mother's house and convalesce, go to a hospital where I would have all of the best treatment available. But no, I decided to continue my practice and get the job done of fixing it here in a local place as best I could, and this is fine, this is satisfactory, this is okay, it is enough. But I think probably only because I've been practicing for a long time prior to that. If I'd been not, and just here on holiday, I might have gone back a little bit quickly to take the comforts of our own familiar environment for such treatment, if that makes sense at all. The treatment I've received here has been top-notch, wonderful, and I'm not criticising it. But sometimes things that we do in our lives are more comfortable in a more familiar environment. After all, I've only been here for 4 months or so. So this is how we deal with these things. So good question. It was preceded by some more commentary there, which I haven't read, but it gave me the context to which you're talking about, and I hope that it clears this up for some other people in relation to pain, because a lot of questions have arisen about this, and if possible, practice before we get the pain. If we've got the pain, accept that that is the way it is. It isn't an additional hindrance to the 5 hindrances. It is the second, ill will or aversion, the hindrance that it highlights, the aversion, the ill will, the not wanting, the desire not to have the pain. Okay, sir, recommend... Oh, sorry, my eyes went funny. Sir, recommend your top 3 books. Well, the Sutta Pitaka, which is actually quite a few books. That's cheating really, because the Pitaka means a basket of books, the suttas. But what I'm referring to there are the suttas, the word of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha. And if I have to bring it to one book, the Majjhima Nikaya, which are the middle-length discourses of the Buddha. And a book called Stillness Flowing by Ajahn Jayasaro, which is the biography of Ajahn Chah. And finally, a very simple one, the Watmark Jan chanting book, which is the Thai Forest tradition chanting book I use, not only for chanting, but I find that it is a very good summary both in the Paritas and in the Suttas chanting of the teachings of the Buddha, those that are contained in that Sutta Pitaka, but in a very easily memorized, shortened form. So they're my 3 books that I would recommend in relation to Buddhism. I think it's dangerous to recommend books, generally speaking, because we all have different tastes. We all listen to different kinds of teachers, have different relationships with our reading material and style, and the way we like to read, the way we like to... we have to have a relationship with the author, and much like with the way we interact or we relate to people in book form, we are relating to the author. So we can't like everybody. So just because I like this particular book, for instance, Stillness Flowing, written by Ajahn Jayasaro, because I think it's the most beautifully written biography, full stop. It is the most beautifully written biography of an outstanding Thai Forest master, Ajahn Chah, whom, if it wasn't for his efforts and patience and compassion in teaching and training Westerners in his monastery, Wat Pho Phong, in northeast Thailand, all those years ago, perhaps the Dharma wouldn't have come to my door. I wouldn't have had that availability, because he established the first Thai Forest Monastery in England with Ajahn Sumedho at the forefront, a monk from America, whom was one of his disciples. So I owe so much to that lineage, and he is of the lineage of Ajahn Mun, who re-established and revitalized the Thai Forest tradition in Thailand in the 1930s to the 1950s, all that time ago. And if it wasn't for him, again, I wouldn't have this lineage from which I've gained so much so far. So that's my perspective on that book and that author. But as you can see, we all have come from different directions. So I'm wondering, as a Buddhist monk, do you sometimes use self-inquiry techniques in the Vedic school to help with maintaining total awareness as compared to single point awareness, etc.? No. I don't relate to the Vedic scriptures, the Bible, the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Quran, the Torah, or any of these things. I follow the teachings, the word of the Buddha, and follow his instructions in relation to meditation. I don't think, analyze, or inquire as to, in an analytical thought process, as to what's going on. I sit and I try and just allow the mind to settle and become calm. And by this I mean tranquil, peaceful, and the way I do that is by bringing my awareness and attention to just one single object of meditation. In my case, it would be usually the breath. But also in my case, as an experienced meditator, very quickly can become quite absorbed in more or less just the state of calm and peacefulness, with no further inquiry necessary. Insights will result from that. Seeing clearly will result from that. Vipassana will result from that, arise from that. Meaning, to see clearly. This is what Vipassana means. It isn't a technique, it is a quality we develop of seeing clearly from samadhi, which is single-pointed awareness that you refer to, as in the teachings of the Buddha. So whatever you're referring to, I'm not sure about. I will once again say to all those whom write 2,000-word essays debating the Vedas and Vedic things in relation to Buddhism and all of this, that I know nothing about those things. I may have made a casual comment in relation to something that provoked a lot of these statements, but really I've chosen this path. I'm a Buddhist monk. I am ecumenical in the sense that I have no problems with any other religion or any view of any other religion, because Buddhism is very compatible with all religions, in that there is no belief system or no dogmatic views that can be argued or affected by. In that sense, we can just excuse me. In that sense, it's quite simple that we can practice what the Buddha taught us in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path without getting too technical, too complex, analytical, and in huge debates with all other forms of teachings, whether they be spiritual, psychological, or just generally religiosity. It's not necessary. So no, I don't. So moving on to the next question. Oh, hello. Here's the question. So somebody finds that the talks are useful to them to ease your basic anxiety, which comes from fear. Do you know what anxiety is teaching us? Well, I'm happy that it's useful to ease that anxiety. It's not so much what I'm saying or the talks, but that you're engaging your mind with something not too active. Hopefully I'm not speaking too quickly, there's not too much argumentative debate like I was just talking about within these talks. There's not really too much to think about, just some things to just redirect our attention to, simple things like this very factors for frequent recollection, for instance, aging, sickness and death. That might sound quite alarming and might provoke anxiety, but with acceptance of those as being the normality of existence, one's anxiety is very much allayed because you're not in an extreme situation. We're all in the same club, the same boat. We're all brothers and sisters in this Dharma, this nature, this truth of aging, sickness and death, the heirs to our karmas, and the fact that we will be parted from all we hold dear. And this is why we recollect these 5 subjects for frequent recollection each and every day if we can. In some countries, Buddhist countries in Thailand, they chant this in the morning chanting or in the evening chanting each day to remind themselves of this, because it's useful to bring it into normality so that it isn't a surprise and something that's less provoking of anxiety. But what is anxiety teaching us? You ask me, do you know what anxiety is teaching us? No, it's not. It is telling us. It is a signal. It is the basis of fear, which is what you're saying from. It's coming from fear. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't survive as a species. We have a natural human instinct to fear fire, for instance, not to put our hand into the fire. If someone was to force us to, we would become anxious firstly. Our body creates certain hormones or feelings in our physical body that what we call anxiety, creating an emotion. So we have a physical form of anxiety in conjunction with emotional anxiety. And these two coupled together are what we call anxiety. Now, one way to soften the blow, soften the effect of anxiety, firstly physically, is to bring one's attention to the breathing in and breathing out, bringing your awareness to the breath. And this is also bringing your awareness and your attention into the present moment and into the body, which is here and now. If you identify the feeling, the physical feeling of anxiety somewhere here in the solar plexus, around the center of your torso, as this floating butterfly fluttery feeling, and know it as just that, just the physical feeling. It's anxiety is just that. The emotional side of anxiety can be rationalized. If you're not, your life isn't immediately a threat, then there's nothing to have this feeling really for. It's just coming from a place of memory, recollection, maybe something that occurred in the past, when something that you're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking about now provokes or brings about a recollection of that memory into this present moment in this physical anxiety form. But what we're being taught by anxiety is to be careful, to be mindful. It's again bringing our attention into the body, but we misinterpret that signal and we panic more, creating more anxiety. But by breathing in and by just simply bringing your awareness to the physical center of anxiety, you can certainly dissipate both its effect and cause. And listening to a Dharma talk that isn't a dramatic piece of action movie or something like that is one way of also helping to calm the mind. So it's like meditation in that sense. Even if it's in a language you don't understand, it can be quite fruitful sometimes to just listen to the Dharma, picking out odd Pali words that you are familiar with. I've had to do that for many years, so okay, try and find the question again. Actually, I think I'll leave that one, it's a bit too, the question's a bit hidden. Can you still call yourself a Buddhist if you do not believe in rebirth? I am personally agnostic about it, and I always understood it to be the karmic effects that carries on. Is that right? That's kind of right, that all of our actions, karma, have results, vipaka. Our actions are what create, of body, speech and mind, are what create the causes and conditions for what is happening now, and what will happen, what we're doing now is what will be created in the next. What we're doing now is creating the causes and conditions for the next moment. That is rebirth, the next moment. Whether we have this physical body and this thinking brain has died or not, we're being reborn continually, moment to moment. That doesn't require any belief, whether you're agnostic or not. That's just a way of explaining Pajittiya Samuppada, which is the 12 links of dependent origination, how one thing leads to another, to another, to another, from ignorance to rebirth, birth within this lifetime. Now, through the practice of sila, samadhi, and panya, keeping precepts enabling us to meditate and develop wisdom, we will see clearly that whatever we're doing within this lifetime is going to set up causes and conditions for something to happen thereafter. Now, this is an understanding, not a belief, but it doesn't have to be something you subscribe to, let's say, call yourself a Buddhist. Buddhist is just a word. It's someone, perhaps you would confirm that a Buddhist is somebody whom is following the teachings of the Buddha, whom is practicing what the Buddha taught in terms of the Noble Eightfold Path. This is as simple as it is. It requires no belief. So if there are aspects of it that aren't compatible with your agnostic, as you put it, views, but your ideas that are not, you're not interested in believing something, then that's okay. This is fine. The way one determines this life in respect to the teachings of the Buddha is to practice in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path, keeping the 5 precepts. Now, if we wanted to be specific about it, if you're breaking the precepts, and technically you can still also be a Buddhist as long as you understand that you are breaking the precepts and are paying attention to that and trying through the practice not to do that. Yes, I mean, you certainly are, and I hope that that explains it. We'll just check again. You know, this rebirth thing, it isn't that hard to understand when you see it as what you're doing each and every day in each and every moment. Okay, my question is, this is right at the end, is it childish to set goals or records in terms of length of meditation time? I appreciate that quality, focusing on the breath, is more important, but time is important too, no? Did you note record lengths of time in your early days of meditation? Okay, so I don't think it's necessarily childish, that's a bit harsh. And setting goals is one word, but we use the Pali word adhitthana, determination it means. Determination is less competitive because it's more, a goal is generally in conjunction with you set a target, and it's usually in relation to previous attainment, a previous target, or another team or something like that, or another person. In terms of a determination, you make a thoughtful and wise determination that you will sit. So I decide I'm going to sit now for 20 minutes. And you make a determination right at the beginning, or in your walking meditation, even at the beginning of the path. A determination that I will walk to the end of the path with just my awareness and attention on the breath. And this is like a goal, and it is actually necessary to make a determination if you want to get anywhere. But we can fall into the trap of increasing the parameters, moving the goalpost, making the determinations harder and harder, thinking that leads to progress. Well, not necessarily. What leads to progress is achieving what you have determined to achieve, but then, as you quite rightly say, the quality of that within. So if you sit for 20 minutes and then 40 minutes and then an hour and then 2 hours, but you are not developing the quality of attention on the breath, then it's no good. It doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or 50 minutes. One must make the determination to stay with the meditation object. But a determination is a healthy, a wise and skillful way of developing this ability to have samadhi, single-pointed awareness, focus on the meditation object. And it is a case that you will gradually increase. So you would start with a determination of a shorter time, and you can gradually increase it, but with wisdom and, most importantly, kindness, both to your physical body and your mental well-being. To put a whole group of people into a situation whereby they all sit bang for 3 hours, regardless, is a little bit generalized. We're all very individual. Some people can achieve a great deal in 5 minutes, but really suffer a lot in a long time, in 3 hours. Some people can not achieve anything in 5 minutes and need 3 hours. We're all different, so only you can know that. So it's best to practice alone for some time, maybe with some recorded guided meditations of different lengths, and find where it's comfortable and suitable for you. And don't be led into competitiveness. After all, the Buddha said enlightenment can be seen in that time. You can become enlightened in a finger snap. So it isn't a great deal of time that's necessary. However, we do need time, most of us need time, to develop the skills to have the focus of attention we call samadhi, and then appreciate absorption in samadhi and ultimately jhanas. Oh, and did I set lengths of time? Well, I didn't have a lot of choice. I went to stay in monasteries where you were told you're sitting until this time, just sit there. So that was in at the deep end and a bit harsh, but I needed that discipline. Otherwise I might have just got up and done something else. So that was useful to me. As I say, we're all different. Okay. Somebody trying to explain to me a different spelling here, what ahimsa is. So you don't need to explain to me such things. Ahimsa just means harmlessness. So that we have it's a Sanskrit word really. It's not in the Pali Canon book, because we sum up harmlessness in the Pali Canon in the teachings of the Buddha as in sila. So we do no harm by keeping the 5 precepts. No killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. So that's in reference to harming ourselves and ultimately potentially others, as I explained a little earlier. By keeping these precepts, it's one precept, do no harm. And by doing no harm, we're giving the gift of fearlessness, but we're not harming ourselves or others. That is the real meaning of ahimsa. I don't need a big long explanation of doing no harm. How does one incorporate dealing with pain in their meditation practice? Specifically, how do I meditate on the chronic pain that I'm in? I think I've really just spoken about that at some length, so I'll leave that for now. If I need to elaborate on it more, let me know. But there's a video, 2, maybe 3, if not 4 videos. If you put English Buddhist Monk pain, they'll come up on this channel. Should lay people do that? I feel as if it would give me anxiety. Perhaps I'm wrong. Actually, you're referring to marananusati, so contemplation of death. And you're quite right. And I just mentioned this, didn't I? That sometimes it might be provoking of anxiety to frequently recollect the fact that we are all subject to aging, sickness and death. And perhaps in some very sensitive people it might, but ultimately you might desensitize to what is only natural, and hopefully that is the point of it. But marananusati is specifically contemplating our own death and the death of others and how real that is. And so if you're of a sensitive disposition, perhaps you shouldn't leave it. You should leave it alone as a lay person. But back to what I mentioned earlier, in order to provoke the sense of urgency in this practice, in order that you can practice now whilst you're fit, young and healthy, know this, realize that you will die. This is why monks are trained early on to practice marananusati, which is contemplation of death, because it gives us a sense of urgency to practice, because it's a very short time to that end. And if we leave it too late, we are unable to practice. So anxiety, as long as you aren't suffering unduly already from it, if a little anxiety comes up as a result of contemplating your own death, it isn't a bad thing as long as you can use it wisely and say, yes, I can allay this anxiety by doing something skillful, wholesome, useful now, whilst I can, and sitting and practicing meditation, keeping the precepts, developing wisdom, and then the anxiety will dissipate in all other areas of your life too. And the time is now, I think, time to wrap this little session up, unless I've got a very short one. I'll answer the short question that I've got in my head that I've remembered, which I can't see here. Somebody asked me, if the Buddha doesn't allow you to sleep in a bed, would he allow you to have a smartphone? Well, I answered no, but I'm sure he would allow me to use one to talk to you about Dharma. And then they replied, well, in that case, is the phone you're using, who owns it? Is it shared by all the other monks? Which I haven't answered, but I'll answer now. I really wonder why that matters, but there are no other monks here. And as to who owns it, it's really, I suppose, whomever paid for it technically, but not really, because they've given it to the Sangha, or the phones I might use, or any equipment I use over and above my 8 requisites is the responsibility of the lay people who have given it to the Sangha for their use. The Sangha is the monks and nuns, and the lay people are the laymen and lay women. Like people, laymen and lay women build temples and build monasteries and build stupas. Nobody lays claim to ownership of these very large chunks of land and buildings and precious materials, and there are in big monasteries cars and all sorts of things. I suppose technically on paper somebody has to own something somewhere, everywhere, but monks do not. We have just 8 things. We own 3 robes, bowl, razor, needle and cotton, belt and water filter. There are only things we can actually own, and a few additional bits of cloth, like maybe a cloth to put on our lap or wipe our bowl up with, a little cloth bag to carry your phone in, our passport, which technically is in ownership of the governments from the country we come from, if you want to get pedantic about it. But don't worry yourself so much about who owns what, where and why. There are probably monks with many other things than that, or there are monks with less than that. It doesn't matter. What matters is the practice and your understanding of it, and what you are doing with that that's what is important. So I hope you can take that as something useful. If not, just let it go. And until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. Namo Buddhaya.